Hello, welcome. Another episode. Here we are. Let's get right to it. Spider, go ahead and get us started here about the Fermi paradox.
Well. Welcome, gentlemen, and everybody in the audience. We are talking about the Fermi paradox here on episode 360 of your favorite show of all time, This Uncanny Earth. Don't lie, you know it is. And we're trying to decide how accurate the paradox is based on the arguments involved. And we're going to discuss a little bit about how we think, opinion wise, some of the science has gone into this. On the surface of it, it seems fairly sound. The premise is, for people who have not heard about it, it refers to, according to the internet here, an apparent gap between the lack of conclusive evidence of advanced extraterrestrial life and the apparently high likelihood of its existence. Now, what that means is we look out into the universe, we look out into the solar system and beyond, and we see so many planets, we see so many stellar bodies, and so many things going on. But one thing we do not see directly is any other form of life other than us. So, why is that? There should be multiple examples, at least of some kind. Maybe not exactly like us, but there should be something out there that's alive other than just us. Now, there's various reasons people have put forth for why that's so. Before we get into the gritty details of all that, I'm going to ask some opinions here. Stephen, regarding the Fermi paradox, what do you think is the primary, out of many reasons, but what's your primary reason
I
that we
think
haven't seen the evidence?
I think it's basically Occam's razor, and the simplest explanation is the one we should go with. And for me, the simplest explanation is we have far too much ego, as humans often do, and we think we're the best things since sliced bread, the best things in the galaxy, and we can't even conceive of the possibility of there being something out there that's so intelligent. Just maybe it has advanced technology and knows how to hide from our modern day sensors. Simple solution.
Robert, what do you think? What do you think is the primary main reason why we have not been able to, despite all these many planets, all these many environments out there, why do you think we haven't found anything that can conclusively say that there's alien life?
We don't have the technology, or they exist on a different dimensional plane than we do. Really, a really simple answer mathematically.
Mhm.
We're not even up to par on being able to harness the power of our own sun, let alone being able to find a civilization that might operate on different physical rules and physical limitations, like ours. So if you don't have the same, at the other end, style of civilization or life, then it's going to be hard to track. If you're using minerals and materials that we have no idea even exist in the universe, and you built your society around these things like we do gasoline, oil, like we do electricity, if those things aren't operating on another planet like that, and their energies from rocks or their energies from crystals, we're not going to be able to pick up on that. So it's more of a lack of modern technology, or should I say advanced technology, than anything else. I do think there's stuff out there. If we look at the Africans and the Dogon tribe finding Sirius B and reported greetings with extraterrestrial beings. I don't want to say aliens. I'm going to say extraterrestrial beings. I think it fits a little bit better when we think of aliens. We're too busy thought in a focus of grays or little green men. I think extraterrestrials allows us for a little more leeway with what we're dealing with.
And those are both good approaches, because considering the paradox and considering that we have not seen direct evidence, there are a lot of potential different reasons for that. Um, we're going to go through some of the main proposed ideas for that. First, we're going to look at the empirical evidence that goes towards building the paradox. The first of these is that there are many, now we're aware of it now. Fermi wasn't as aware of it in his day. There was some assumption at the time, but our technology has supposedly allowed us to see vaster distances and different solar systems, different galaxies. That there are a large quantity of suitable planets. We have what are called exoplanets, which is our term, or at least Earth scientists' term, for planets that are potentially Earth-like. Now, I have some thoughts about this first. But we're going to ask you guys first. Stephen, considering the vast number of planets, do you think potentially that we should still be looking at exoplanets specifically because they're supposedly Earth-like, or should we be looking for life in other places that we might not consider?
I think we should be looking for different forms of life that we may not even, at this current stage of our knowledge, consider to be life. For example, plants are living creatures. They have reproductive systems. They actually scream out in pain when they're cut. They just do it at a frequency that the basic human ear can't hear. So I think we need to actually rethink our whole entire search and start considering other forms of life. Like, I was watching a video. I didn't actually get to watch it yet, but I saw a headline for a video earlier, and obviously it very was likely clickbait, but it was saying something about, like, what if fog is alive? Or, and then the movie Nope, that gave the idea, what if clouds are conscious? Like, what if clouds actually hide biological entities of some sort? And germs might be considered life. We might need to look on the microscopic scale.
And viruses and things of that nature too.
Yeah.
Viruses have been compared to almost artificial intelligence in how they look kind of like miniature machines and things of that nature, like nanobots, sort of.
Exactly.
Rob, same question. What do you think? You think we should be sticking mostly to the exoplanets, or should we be widening that net? Should we be considering other sources?
First of all, I want to make something perfectly clear. We can't count plants. We can't count viruses. We can't count fog. That's not the type of extraterrestrial entities we are talking about. Let's get to the nitty gritty of all this. We're talking about extraterrestrials that either A, look like us, or are hominoid species that have great technological advancements like us. That's what we're really looking for. I don't think we're looking for plant monsters. I don't think we're looking for viruses. We're not looking for the fog creatures. We're looking for something that is akin to us, because that would be the most logical thing to look for. Now, in searching for exoplanets, you have to extend that reach out. Once again, though, this is going to boil down to technology. We don't have the technological advancements to scan for different things. Now, is that to say that magnesium, iron, things like that out in the solar system can't be mined and used by other civilizations? No, they very well could be, but their mining process, their manufacturing process might be so different that to us, it just looks like the galaxy's moving as it's moving. Everything is part and piece moving as it's supposed to, but those parts and pieces might only be moving because of those extraterrestrial laden planets. Now, am I sitting here saying these exist? No, but I think when we're discussing extraterrestrials, we have to sort of put them akin to us in technological advancements, because if we don't, I think we're short-sighting ourselves, because isn't that what we're looking for? We're looking for a civilization that has greater technology than we do. I mean, that's really the whole process of wanting to meet extraterrestrial life. Nobody wants to meet extraterrestrial life and it's a caveman in a cave somewhere, 50 million light years away. No, because we have a romanticized idea of what we want extraterrestrials to be. We want them to be able to provide us with some sort of flying machine that doesn't make any noise and doesn't have an exhaust. It just is clean energy. We want something that's going to be able to phase in and out of matter. We want the cool stuff. Nobody wants to sit back and think, there's some caveman, like I said, 50 million light years away beating a rock. It's counterproductive to how we think. And I think the only way that we can truly do this is by scanning all these outer planets. Now, is that to say that plants in a term of like a giant Venus flytrap or a sentient plant species, much like in Mass Effect, doesn't exist? No, I think that's very possible. Because if we're looking on dry or if we're looking on jungle worlds, plant life might be a little different. Oxygen higher, it's going to produce different types of creatures. But I think when we talk about extraterrestrials and the Fermi paradox, I think we need to stay focused on entities that would be like us, because we are our own sentient species. And Stephen makes an interesting point. We think we're top of the food chain until we're not, and I think that's something that all humans do. I think we have that arrogance about us that's inladen in us for a reason. Yeah, I think it's caused a lot of technological advancement that we don't see. Or I don't want to say we don't see, we take for granted in our day-to-day lives. So I think the only way that we can process extraterrestrial life is by procuring different data sets, different data models from different planets. And sometimes I think that is cause for digging into the past of the planet. Like Mars used to have water. So what kind of life did Mars inhabit? A lot of people like to say, well, life is in the water. If there's water, there's life. But amoebas are cool and all, viruses are cool and all, but I want some tangible proof of something like us, something that exists either on our level or a level close to ours, or just a level that shows basic communication abilities, basic intrinsic values to share each other's cultures in terms of human beings versus whatever else is out there. So I think the only way we do that, we have to expand our search well beyond whatever solar system we're in now and sort of push that out, albeit maybe to the Andromeda galaxy, maybe to all these different areas that we haven't thought of before.
Now that makes a lot of good points, but also I want to kind of reconcile a couple things between what you said and what Steven said. Because the thought that life could be all of these different things, these ideas become important in two ways, depending on our thought process going out. If we are attempting to go out into the universe, there's two ways that we're going to do it. We're probably not going to combine them into one grand Star Trek style mission to seek out everything, because as we are right now, we're kind of flighty and we're kind of twitchy and we're flaky and we can't stick to one idea. So there's going to be two agendas we have to pick from, primarily, I think, to when we're going out into space, if we manage to do that. One is to meet other life and exchange cultural and technological ideas. And I think that's on the position that you're coming from, Rob, where we have to kind of connect on the technological and look for species kind of like us. The other idea, though, is if we're going out primarily for resources, if we're instead not necessarily looking for other forms of life, if we're looking for resources, in that case, we go to a planet and we'll need to understand what life is on that planet. Because to Stephen's point, if we go to a planet and it's an amorphous kind of airborne creature that's mostly airborne particles that resembles a fog or something of that nature, just to use an example, if we use giant fans, blow through the fog, we're committing potential genocide on a species, whether it's intelligent or not. But that depends. Again, if we're looking to meet other species, we might not care. If we're looking to look for resources rather than meet other species, that becomes more of a moral imperative. So it depends on what we're really looking for when we go out there. At least that's my opinion on it. And we could debate that probably for hours on end as far as getting into the morals of all that kind of stuff. I think we did actually last season. We had the morals and ethics of space exploration, and we did touch on that a little bit. So if anybody wants to hear our more in-depth discussion on that, not right now, you're watching us right now, go back and watch that later. The other part that both of you have touched on a couple of times already, the other part of empirical evidence that supports the Fermi paradox, is that humans currently see no evidence of life. Now, there's again two positions that we've talked about on here. One is the ignorance position. It's that we're not looking the right way for life, or we don't really care to find the right kind of life. We're just looking out there for selfish reasons, if at all. Um, and so we're blinding ourselves by not being able to see what's possibly right in front of us. Whereas on the other side, Rob, you mentioned we're limited by our technology. And that's also true. And I want to expand on that a little bit. First off, Rob, where we are with the technology. Um, I know, and I know the three of us know, that we're pretty far behind where we want to be to do real space exploration. We're limited. I mean, we send rovers and we send things to Mars and we send flybys to Jupiter and whatnot. But as far as us going anywhere, we've never gone farther than our own backyard, which is the moon, as far as we're aware. So, what do we need to do? What do we need to focus on to be able to get ourselves to a level of technology that allows us to see beyond our current neighborhood? What do you think, Rob?
So I think what this is going to take is a breakthrough of some scientific magnitude. It's not something we're just going to be able to um, know how to do. I think it's something we're going to stumble upon, and I think it's going to be a very haphazard situation to where we are dealing with something that is new to us. And I think the one thing we have to really understand too, and this is something that is that is brought forth with the Fermi paradox, is a lot of civilizations stay quiet because they don't want to be found by a predatory species. So, as long as they have a way to block out our ability to tune into whatever they're doing, they're going to stay beneath the radar. What we need to do is find something that can seek that out. However, the biggest issue we're dealing with is what are the physics in these other worlds? How do radio waves react? How do microwave waves react? How do just waves in general, sound waves, sine waves, the whole nine, the whole thing. Because if one thing is different, that might make the whole thing different. And we can't scan for that because we have no idea it exists. You can go off of radiation. A lot of people say you can go off radiation. But I think that is a sort of a blanket statement because radiation is radiation. It exists. Just because something has radiation doesn't mean there's people there. It doesn't mean that there's energy there. And, you know, I agree. We don't know what we're listening for. We don't know what to check for. We just kind of throw darts and hopefully the darts stick. Hopefully those things stick and hit a bullseye. It hasn't yet. And I believe because our ways are either archaic, forgotten, or we aren't on a dimensional or advanced level enough to pull those waves in and convert them into what messages they are trying to send out. That is if and only if these civilizations are trying to reach out to talk to us. Now, there's a hypothesized zoo theory that floats around that states they're masking their signals because they don't want to be found. They want to see how we're going to fare in the universe, which obviously isn't too well since we are at best, I believe it's a zero point 0.7, not even enough to harness our own power of our sun. And until we can get to that point where we can harness that power of our own sun via Dyson spheres, stellar engines, black hole bombs, like we discussed last time, we're not going to get to that point. And if we do, like I said, it'll be a stumble. It won't be something that we do on purpose. It'll be something that, wait a minute, we didn't know that tungsten reacted to this to produce a certain signal. It's going to be something we stumble upon. And I think that it has to be advanced in a way that helps us as well as help them, or else we're just sending out a signal for something predatory to come and take whatever they want. Do I think that'll happen? Probably not, but I think it's something we always need to be thinking about.
Now, along those lines, before we pivot to you, Stephen, and I get your thoughts on the moral outlook of what we're trying to get to here, I want to address a comment. Mama Tissa in the comments there, she asked, he or she, sorry, don't want to assume anything. What is it? What if we don't know what to listen for? And that's actually a key part of this, the paradox as well, because everything we decipher from space is radio signals, and that's only when those radio signals are pointed at us. It has to be directional, and it doesn't mean necessarily that it's aimed at us specifically. Stars might turn at the right orbit and we just get their signal right at the right time, black holes, etc., etc. But things like broadband, we can't detect from space. Our own spacecraft and satellites can't detect pinpoint broadband coming off of our planet. And we use so much of it here for the internet and everything like that. Now, satellite internet might be something else, but if another civilization uses the equivalent to broadband, we can't detect it because it's not directed at us. It's too far of a distance. If you were right next to the planet, maybe, and doing some deep scans, you can check this kind of stuff, but you can't search it from deep space. So that's an interesting point, and it's part of the paradox. Stephen, the other part of it that we were talking about, of course, is that potentially we're blinding ourselves to what to look for. We're possibly morally or ethically ignorant to what we're looking at because maybe we don't want to, or maybe we're arrogantly trying to find it in a way that obviously they're going to say, well, no, you're not going to find me because you're a bunch of jackasses down there. How important do you, or how much of an impact do you think this outlook is potentially having on our search for extraterrestrial life?
I would say predominantly, maybe about 60 to 70%, because I believe personally that it's just simply human ego that we insist on looking for other things that look like us, act like us, talk like us, and communicate like us, or even, like Rob said, we so many people insist that whatever we're looking for has to look like us or else it's not important. And, like I said earlier, even if there's small germs, I mean, look at that, thing a few years ago that got everything on lockdown, those were just some small germs, but look at how many people were affected by that in a negative way. And, with all that stuff going on, it's very easy for me personally to consider the possibility that alien life might look alien.
And that plays into a lot of ways that we deal with things on this planet. We are motivated by a lot of issues that aren't necessarily for the betterment of our species. We're motivated by individual money. We're motivated by individual entertainment. We're motivated by a lot of different things. So that can definitely be a factor in keeping us from seeing possibly the obvious. Or it could even be, as Rob suggested, that other civilizations see that as immaturity, as something that you guys aren't ready to be out here in the galactic sphere.
That's what I think.
You got to stay put, and we're not going to talk to you until you're ready. Rob, you have a question or an addendum?
I think that what if that's built into us for that sole purpose? That
Potential.
so we never escape that. You know what I mean? So we don't get out there, that we don't show ourselves to the Galactic Federation or the Empire, whoever is out there traipsing around. If there is a global entity, that's a lot of ancient astronaut theorists propose that there's a galactic federation of aliens that don't like us. Like, and to that, I want to say, if you have a problem, come see me, and you can get beat up. I will beat up an alien without prejudice or with prejudice. So don't do that. No, I'm kidding. But I think that's how they view us. They view us as these barbaric creatures that destroy each other any chance we get. And I have to agree in that we do that because we haven't reached a level of technological advancement that allows us to flourish. All of our technological advancements have been double-sided or double-edged. It's a double-edged razor. Yes, you have autonomous machines in factories now that produce faster. They make the business more money. Their timing is better. However, the flip side of this is it lays off the workers, or it takes the worker out of the equation, so the worker can't make money to feed their children. And that's the issue I think we face, is we are so caught up in our own dichotomy, in our own situational like business, that we don't have time for extraterrestrial things. I don't know about you guys, but I talk to a lot of people about aliens, and I get maybe, if I'm lucky, 6 out of 10 people that are interested. Other than that, it's very much I don't care. And I don't fault those people for not caring. Life can be a burden. And you don't got time to think about aliens when you're working, a 12-hour shift trying to feed, 3 kids. This is something I very much understand. However, I think there are a lot of people that do, myself included. I know Steven does. I know you do. That's how we became friends, was having those conversations at work. So I don't think that the conversations aren't out there, mind you, but they are not. And that's a good question that you put out there, is that our curiosity has been dimmed by the rat race. We're so focused on the here and now. And I think this is something that we need to consider. I think the only way that we ever make any form of contact or communicate with extraterrestrial life is if we can prolong our lifespans, because really that's what it's about with us, right? We want to get to what we want to get because we're dying. We're decaying a little bit every day. Our cellular degradation is a little bit every day. We have a short span of time considering what the universe is and considering what these extraterrestrials are. So they may look at us like they're just a short span creature. There's no real reason for us to make contact because they're consistently changing. They're not a civilization that has been established for thousands and hundred thousands of years, like many ancient astronaut theorists believe that these civilizations are ancient. And I'm not talking, our planet of like Egypt or the pyramids or anything. I'm talking before this. We're talking different civilizations. So I believe these exist. It's possible. There's no proof. We can't find them. I think it's an interesting thought experiment. But I think until we can increase our longevity, we're not going to be able to communicate, because it's going to hamper us. It's always hampered us. Our gravity, our cellular degradation will always hamper us, because we're just, let's be honest here, we're just meat suits, really just a bag of meat. If we really look at it in that way, if we look at it in terms of here's an alien, here's us, right? Here's an extraterrestrial, here's us, right? The extraterrestrial is high up in the technological spectrum. They've harnessed the power of their own sun. They know how to move time. They know how to do time dilations. They do all of these things. What business would they have with us? They wouldn't need to have business with us, especially if they exist in a different dimensional plane. If they exist in a 4D plane, they can see us. We can't see them. And you can use a tesseract as a 4-dimensional, the way we could see it, but tesseract isn't alive. It's not alive. And what is alive to us might register different to these entities. They might not have the heart, the lungs, the stomach, right? They might operate independently. You talk about the fog monster on the fog planet, right? It doesn't have a heart or lungs in the same way we have a heart or lungs. You talk about maybe some bugs on the bug planet, right? They got a thorax, they got all that. And we're talking some science fiction aspects. Good point. We could be bugs to them, and that's the interesting point. I think until we are able to first ascertain our own situation in life, our own situation in our continuation of being mankind, we're always going to fall short of finding these extraterrestrials, because we die. We don't have a long lifespan. You don't have a guy that can work on a project for 1,000 years. And it's by design. because maybe humans, if we live that long, would be ultra destructive. Look what we do now to each other. Look what we do to each other. And this isn't to play any sort of political aspect or games or anything else. Human beings are cruel to each other.
Period.
They always have been. They're not going to stop. That's what's in us.
Human
It's
nature.
in us to be this way. So we're our own worst enemy. And I think we're our own worst enemy when it comes to any form of alien contact until mankind can put aside their differences with each other first. Because, and I don't mean to derail this any really too much further. Imagine if aliens landed, right? Half of the population would feel one way and the other half feel another way. We're not countering in the religious aspects of these two, because what does that do to the religious aspect of our society? It could tear it apart, tear the foundation apart. Then humans riot. So we're just a bunch of ants circling around, trying to avoid the magnifying glass, right? And here's these beings that supposedly have superior technology, superior everything. And, a lot of people say, what about the grades and things like that? I think extraterrestrials just don't. They look at us as trash. They look at us as the most ghetto planet they have ever seen. They drive by it and they do not stop. All their space windows are rolled up when they roll by our planet. And can you blame them? Can you really, at the end of the day, blame them for not wanting to make contact? We are the hood. We and until there's a way to alleviate that resource corruption, it's not going to change, because there's too many nations fighting for resources. There's too many nations fighting for the resources of Africa. Instead of pulling together and making things happen, we can't, because our fault lies in A, the longevity that we don't have, and B, our constant quarreling with one another.
Now, this is an interesting thing that some fantasy writers kind of already have alluded to many times, because when you look at fantasy writing as opposed to sci-fi, instead of having extraterrestrials and things, you have elves and dwarves and all these different species. In most of the big, real in-depth ones, like Tolkien and some of the other ones, all of the other species live for vast amounts of time. And they have their own councils. They have their own, this is how should we deal with this threat that's in the land. This is what should we do. They don't come to the humans for their opinions or for their help, because you guys haven't lived long enough. You guys are just kids on the block. You guys don't know how to deal with this stuff. Plus, you're immature. You're just going to want to hit things with a sword. But eventually, in all of these stories, humans get a turning point, generally in numbers or in technology, which in fantasy is usually just steam engines or something like that. And the other races are like, wow, that's it. There goes the neighborhood. And instead of
Steam
having us join them, most of the time they say, we're going to step back. We're going to disappear. We're going to let you guys have it because this is what you wanted. If you think you're ready, you go ahead. And they go do their thing.
I think we don't. We sit here and talk about them having better technology than us. What if they have worse? What if we can't detect? What if we can't detect their tech because it's awful? It's lower than AM radio. Like, it's not something that can even be picked up because it's so bad. But to them, it's the most advanced piece of technology that they have. But to us, it'd be like putting the two like little metal rods in a potato and connecting a wire to it. You know what I mean? And using that for power. And I don't think we think of this. I think we always go the other spectrum and say, what if they're more powerful than us? What if they're weaker than us? What if their technology is so archaic, right, that we bypass them in the 1700s? So why? Why would we care, right? Why would anybody care if there is a lower leveled extraterrestrial out there? We're going to bully them? We could. Go take their resources and abscond with them. We could do that. We sure could. We're human beings. And I think that's an interesting point, and I brought this up, Tissa, is the fact that we can't measure everything. And if they decide that they work on a whole different way of energizing their homes, heating their homes, cooling their homes, and we can't detect it because, once again, we have the archaic technology compared to them. And so we sit here and like, yeah, we're throwing these radio waves out in space, and the answer's like, radio waves. I mean, radio waves in 50 billion years. What are radio waves? That's something our ancestors wrote about in books that we can't touch because they will fall apart in our hands. We look at things like the playable organ, right? I've seen one of these firsthand, right? And they're scrolls, and you only have so many plays of those scrolls before they fall apart, right? For the time, technological advancement, right? It plays itself like a player piano. It plays itself. You just put you put the music in, and it reads the little nubs and holes, and it plays.
My dad has
now we don't do that, right? We don't do that. I can't tell you the last time I went to the Best Buy and was like, man, I need to give me one of them old style sheet music players. We don't do this. It's a novelty item now. It's a novelty item. It's cool. It's a parlor trick. It's an interesting thing if you have some money. But back in the day, that was kind of par for the course in a lot of saloons and restaurants and things like that, the player piano. So what if they're looking at us like these dudes are a bunch of dorks? They can't even harness the power of their own sun. And here we are. We can harness the whole power of our universe. We can harness the whole power of multiple suns. Why would we want to hobnob or be seen with such lower level entities? And that's even if we can bypass the communication barrier, right? What if we can't even understand them? What if we have zero idea? And there's no way that you could translate that. Because what if their worlds are so different, we don't even have the same things? That's how you have to look at it.
Stephen, anything further before we move on?
Yes, I wanted to add on to the Galactic Federation conversation. And I've heard a theory that some people say that the reason we don't see aliens and the reason they don't come around is because, like we said a minute ago, we're kind of like the ghetto. We're the hood, nobody wants to come around because we're so violent. And here's the theory, though. Some people believe that we're actually immortal spiritual beings, and we were actually designed to live forever and be immortal, but then they twisted and tainted our DNA and messed it up. And that's why humans don't live anymore like King Methuselah did in the Bible for 900 years or thousands of years or however long they used to live, back in the day. One of the reasons is because they messed with our DNA. Through CRISPR technology that we're starting to discover now, we can fix that. But the idea is that we're a prison planet, and we're all the souls of like political dissidents and terrorists and stuff like that, and just criminals in general.
We're Australia,
and so they put us here, pretty much. And so they put us on Earth as in these fleshy, meaty vessels to punish us for our crimes until we can once again reach as Rob was saying a minute ago, reach a higher spiritual plane where we can stop fighting with each other and come to peace. And once we learn to come to peace, they'll allow us to get off Earth and go back and join everyone else.
Interesting hypothesis. And I've heard that as well, too. Yeah. I've heard different variations of the prison planet scenario, and it is fascinating. We're going to finish up on one of the more controversial explanations, I think, for the Fermi paradox. It's only one of the many explanations that can be made as to why it exists, but this is definitely one of the ones that a lot of people might disagree on. And that is that we are far too rare, and that life is such a rarity in the universe, the being in the habitable zone, being on a planet that produces the right mix of air and water, etc., the right mix of DNA, all that kind of thing.
Goldilocks zone.
This is generally the explanation put forth by most mainstream religious thought, because the explanation is, well, there is no one else out there because it's just us, because we're special, because we were made specifically for this place and time. And the fact that we can see planets and all this other stuff out there isn't evidence that there's anything else out there. It's evidence of, look how great the being is that created us. Look how awesome this creator is. and we should just worry about that and not worry about extraterrestrial life. Now, on the flip side to that, a few popes ago, I don't remember which one. I think it was the one that was around most of the time when I was growing up, which I think that was
John
what,
Paul
John Paul.
the
Yeah.
second. Yeah, John Paul the second.
He apparently went on record at some point towards the end of his tenure as saying that extraterrestrial life could potentially exist, and if they do, then they would potentially have the same connection to the divine as we do. Now, it's an interesting concept as well that a religion that we assume is just ours here is something that exists beyond our solar system. But then you think about maybe it's a universal thing that's been boiled down to this is how we experienced it and this is how we wrote about it, but it's part of something else that's a little bit bigger than that, et cetera, et cetera. But what do you think about the idea, first, Stephen, that the reason we don't find extraterrestrial life is that we are the only life because we're that special? Not necessarily special as in we deserve to be special, but because we were created to be the only life here.
Well, I actually saw a leaked YouTube video with all this, UFO files coming out lately. I actually did see a UFO interview with an alien from 1964, supposedly, if it was a real video. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of fake stuff out there, but
Allegedly.
in the video, they said that it was an interview with an alien, supposedly, and a majestic agent, and they were talking about all that stuff, and they actually said that they came here from, very far away, and they were talking about, religion, and in the video the aliens were talking about it, and they said that you, us, the plants, the animals, all living creatures are one and the same. We are all one shared consciousness fragmented into all these different vessels. And so that's very interesting to me, and I like that concept because it's very intriguing to think that, because it lines up with a theory that I've had for a long time, and I've thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we were just like one single person on this entire planet, the entire galaxy was actually a real person, but they were in a coma and they were just dreaming everything, and all these other people are just tulpas in their dream, but the tulpas got bored of being tulpas and they forgot they were tulpas because they've been around for so long. They started to think they were real, and then they started creating other tulpas, and the tulpas come complete with memories of their entire history.
And that's a variation of that I've heard before, the dreaming God theory.
Yes.
That we're all part of some other greater entity's dreaming.
And when we die, we go back to the source.
Now, and I like that theory. I'm not 100% sold on it, but I do like it because it's a really interesting thought experiment as far as that stuff goes. And they use that a lot in fantasy writing as well, and some sci-fi also. Now, Rob, being a man of religion yourself, not necessarily somebody who follows the exact dogma of this and that, but somebody who's a religious person nonetheless, how do you approach the thought that the reason we haven't found anything is that we are the only thing?
That's a tough one to sort of entertain, because I'm of the mind, while I do have my religious faith and my beliefs, and I work with those consistently, I think the only reason we haven't found is maybe that's not something that God wants for us. He doesn't want us to find that. He made this over here for a reason, and they're over there for a reason. We're over here for a reason, and we don't know the lessons being taught to them, and they don't know the lessons that are being taught to us. I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that God created aliens. If aliens exist, it's not going to shake the foundation of my faith. I'm still going to have the same faith I had yesterday and the day before, and it might even strengthen a little bit, because it's going to start, okay, so now there's more to this thing than I thought. I don't think we're special enough that God only made us. I think that we are special in that God just made us that we know of. We sort of get that little bit of like veil that, hey, is there something? Who knows? It might not be for our betterment, and it might be for our detriment, to find something like that. And God sees that and says, you know what, I can't do this with you guys, because if I do, you're going to wipe yourselves out. You know, um, maybe we're the family embarrassment that's kept in the basement so no one can see us. You know what? You're not wrong. I was talking at the beginning of the show, Ron, and I say, we are the ghetto. Aliens drive by us and they say, no, we're going to get robbed, because we would rob an alien. Like, if a UFO crashes here, we're going to steal some stuff out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Probably sell it. Well, somebody will put that bad boy on eBay. Somebody will put that bad boy on Facebook Marketplace. Hey, I found this alien ship, $500 or best offer. You know what I mean? Because we are like this. This is what we do as human beings. We are an embarrassment to ourselves. Look at how much
what we did in
cringy
Roswell.
things. Look how much cringy things we do for the internet. I wrote the Windows in Florida. I found myself in Harnett, and I don't blame you for that one bit.
Now, what's one final thought for me about all that? What is interesting is that this kind of plays a little bit into earlier religious thoughts have had talk that there are other planets, but they don't necessarily call them other planets. They might call them other realms or other places or other, locations. The Jewish Kabbalah specifically talks about how there were a certain number of spheres, which is an interesting word choice.
Well, don't forget
Spheres,
about Dante's Inferno.
that
Different
as well,
levels
the
of
different levels.
purgatory, paradise.
The spheres stand out to me because on each of the spheres was created a species that failed, and they were left behind on their sphere. And so there's like 7 or 8 spheres of, quote, demons or dark creatures that didn't work out because they were something wrong with them. And we're the latest one of those. We assume we're the one that came out right, but maybe we're not. Maybe there's another one after us that's in the work, or maybe it's there already. Maybe there's another one out there that's like, well, the humans didn't work, screw them, let's go build another one. Or maybe there's 3 or 4 more. And I think when you put it into a context like that, it
I dig
really
it.
throws an angle in the whole idea of it. But that brings our discussion of the Fermi paradox mostly to a close. Final thoughts from me, and then I'll get your final thoughts from the two of you. I think there's too many layers to have a definitive explanation to why we have not actually encountered life. If there are billions of stars and planets out there, if the universe is so vast, I don't think it's that difficult not to find something out there. I think not necessarily that life is rare, but it is uncommon, and the distances are huge. The light years are just out of control. We may never find another species, especially if the universe is expanding like some theories suggest and pushing everything in separate directions. So who knows? I would like to find out, but I don't know if I ever will. Stephen, final thoughts?
I think that life is probably out there, but it's a combination of a bunch of little stuff, and it's like Rob said, we don't have the right technology. Like I said, I don't think we're looking at it the right way, and in general, it's just not meant to be. We're not meant to know, like Rob said, one way or the other.
And Rob, your final thoughts?
Until we conquer the problem of our longevity, we're not going to be able to do anything, because just because somebody wants to start something doesn't mean the next person wants to follow through with it in the same manner or fashion. And if things get lost, or concepts or thoughts get changed to a point where they can't be figured out, that's not to mention different entity or different government entities, different groups that don't want this to get out there, that don't want people to know this, because it would cause, I think, a worldwide panic. You have people in their bubbles, right? In their day-to-day 9 to 5 bubbles. And if those bubbles are burst by, oh, now we found extraterrestrial life and we can make contact, I think you would see a panic on a scale. And people say, well, they've been desensitizing us to this for years with movies and things like that. They haven't. There's nothing like seeing an actual something that doesn't work with your brain, because we have a set bunch of laws and rules. Unless it's a child's brain's a little more malleable, so they could see an alien and not be as perplexed about said aliens. But us, I think it would cause a lot of people mental breakdowns. You would see something that you didn't think was in the realm of possibilities, not a physical possible thing, but now you're seeing this thing. And if these extraterrestrials have technology that would blow our minds, I think until we solve that longevity problem and our technological problem, we're not going to find anything.
Good discussion from everybody. We had a lot of good points made, a lot of good theories and facts thrown out. So I want to thank both of my my fellows for entertaining my idea. If there's nothing else, Rob, why don't you sign us off?
Well, everyone, as always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We will see you folks for another fantastic episode of This Uncanny Earth right here on This Uncanny Media Network next week, Saturday, 10 p.m. EST. We will see you guys then. Peace.